A police dog starts barking at the basement of an elderly woman's home. When officers break in, what they find behind the padlocks freezes everyone to the bone. It was supposed to be just another wellness check. The call came from a neighbor, worried about muffled screams echoing from the home of Mrs. Mildred Carraway, an 82-year-old woman who had lived on the same quiet Ohio street for over 4 decades. When the county officers arrived at the small wooden house, they found the lights off, the front door slightly ajar, and an eerie silence that didn't sit right. The wind tapped against the windows like something inside was waiting, watching. Bishop, the K-9 unit, was the first to react. As soon as he stepped into the narrow hallway, his ears perked, his nose twitched, and he let out a sharp, frantic bark. He rushed toward a hatch in the floor, the entrance to the basement, and growled, low and tense. It wasn't just a bark. It was a warning. Whatever was down there, it wasn't right. The officers exchanged wary glances. None of them were ready for what came next. "There's something down there," muttered Officer Delaney Voss, shining her flashlight on the lock. Next to her, Sergeant Nolan Pike tightened his jaw, his eyes flicking to the old woman, who stood trembling near the wall. Mildred stared blankly at the padlocks, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, don't open it. That's not just a basement." What caught their attention wasn't just the trapdoor, but the wall beside it. Dozens of padlocks hung on metal hooks, arranged by size and color like some sort of twisted collection. Some were rusted, others new, a few still had barcodes on them. Above the wall, a torn yellow strip of crime scene tape flapped gently, a sign that someone had been here before. But whatever was beneath the floor had remained untouched. "Who put all these locks here, Mrs. Carraway?" Delaney asked, crouching beside her. Mildred didn't answer right away. Her eyes shimmered, and her wrinkled hands clutched the hem of her dress. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like old wood. "I had to lock it. If they get out, no one will be safe." Bishop barked again, louder this time. He pawed at the floorboards, claws scratching against the wood, desperate to dig through. It wasn't just a scent he picked up. It was something else. Something deeper. Something that hurt. And in that moment, as the team debated whether to break the locks or walk away, none of them realized that tonight, everything they thought they knew about Mildred Carraway, and about evil itself, was about to change. If this story kept you hooked, just wait for what's coming next. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. It really helps us keep bringing you stories like this. See you in the next episode. Some things are meant to stay buried. But some doors, once opened, can never be shut again. The sound of metal echoed through the hallway as Sergeant Pike clipped the last lock from the basement hatch. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Bishop, who had been relentlessly barking moments before, had grown quiet, his body tense, tail low, ears back. The officers hesitated. No one wanted to be the first to open it. Officer Voss glanced at Mildred, who stood frozen against the hallway wall, eyes shut tight, lips whispering something over and over. It was a prayer. The hatch creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a narrow set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. The beam of Voss's flashlight caught particles of dust floating like ash in the stale air. "Smells like mildew and something else, something off," she muttered. Pike went first, gun drawn, the wooden steps creaking under his boots. Bishop followed, his growl low and guttural. Whatever was down there, it had a scent he didn't like. The basement was colder than it should have been, too cold for a spring night in Ohio. The cement floor was damp, and the air tasted metallic, almost like old blood. At first, it looked empty. Just shadows, peeling paint, and the slow drip of water from a rusted pipe. But then Delaney's flashlight landed on something against the far wall. Boxes, crates, and a row of old dolls lined up on a shelf, their eyes glazed and cracked. One of them had no face. "What the hell is this?" Pike murmured, moving closer. Behind the crates, there was a door. Metal. Reinforced. Bolted shut from the outside. A lock hung from the latch, different from the others. Newer. Cleaner. Delaney reached for her radio. "We're gonna need backup. And evidence bags. A lot of them." Her voice was tight. Controlled. But her hands were shaking. Back upstairs, Mildred hadn't moved. She stood like a statue, staring at the open hatch. One of the younger officers approached her gently. "Ma'am, what's behind that door downstairs?" She blinked slowly, her voice a ghost of itself. "Memories. Regrets. And a promise I made a long time ago, not to let it out again." And in that moment, even the most skeptical officer in the room felt something shift. Not fear, not yet, but the cold breath of something they couldn't explain. Because people keep secrets. That's human. But this, whatever this was, felt older than secrets. Older than guilt. Older than Mildred herself. Some doors are meant to stay closed. But something was starting to wake up. The air in the basement had shifted. Even with the floodlights on, the space felt darker than before. Every sound echoed twice. Officer Voss stayed close to Bishop, who now paced in small, anxious circles, ears pinned back, nose low to the ground. He didn't bark again. He only stared at the door, the one lock still hanging from the latch like it didn't belong there. Sergeant Pike took a slow step toward it. "This one's different," he muttered. "Too clean. Too new." He crouched to examine the edges of the frame. There were scratch marks, deep ones. Not just from keys. From something trying to get out. Upstairs, Mildred hadn't moved from the kitchen table. Her eyes were wide, fixed on nothing. "I told them once," she whispered to herself. "They didn't listen. And they were taken." One of the younger officers heard her but didn't respond. He only swallowed hard and turned away. Back in the basement, a soft metallic noise broke the silence. It came from behind the door. Like fingernails on steel. Everyone froze. Bishop growled again, a low, vibrating sound in his throat. "Back up," Pike said firmly, raising his voice just enough. Delaney didn't move. She was staring at the door, her breath shallow. There was something in the air, something that felt wrong. Not just fear. Something older than fear. She wasn't sure if it was coming from behind the door, or from inside herself. Then came Mildred's voice. Not loud, but clear enough to cut through the walls and hit the bone. "If you open that door, you'll let it remember who you are." And somehow, those words felt like a warning and a curse. Some memories don't fade. They wait. The basement remained sealed, for now. Pike made the call to hold off. No one argued. The final lock felt alive, like it was waiting. Bishop refused to go near it. Instead, he sat silently by the stairs, his eyes fixed on the metal door. No barking. No growling. Just fear. And if the dog was afraid, that meant something was very wrong. Delaney returned to the kitchen. Mildred hadn't moved. Same posture, same distant stare. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her shawl. "We found a photo," Delaney said gently. "You were just a kid. The door was already locked." Mildred's eyes didn't blink. "She started early," she whispered. "My mother said it came from under the ground. Before the house. Before us." One of the rookies had gone into the attic. He found a sealed wooden box wrapped in an old cloth. Inside were black and white photos. Dozens of them. Some showed children. Others showed nothing but the door. Closed, always closed. In one, Mildred stood in front of it, maybe 10 years old. 2 locks already in place. A shadowy figure loomed behind her. Delaney felt her chest tighten. "This isn't new," she said. "This has been going on for decades." Pike nodded. He was pale, silent. "This door, it's older than her. Maybe older than this house." That thought settled over the room like dust. Heavy. Still. Unsettling. No one dared to speak for several seconds. Outside, clouds began to roll in. The sky darkened. Wind pressed against the windows, shaking the glass gently. Then, from below, that same sound. A scrape. Slow. Careful. Like a reminder, "I'm still here." Bishop whimpered and backed away further, disappearing into the living room. Mildred finally looked up. Her voice was soft, dry. "It doesn't want freedom," she said. "It wants to finish the story." Delaney leaned in. "What story?" Mildred's eyes met hers. "Yours." "Mine." "Everyone who steps near it. That door doesn't just hold something in. It reflects what we try to forget." "You can lock a door. But can you lock away memory?" Outside, the wind was picking up. Leaves whipped against the windows as if nature itself was growing uneasy. Inside the house, the officers were split between unease and curiosity. No one dared touch the final lock yet, but they were edging closer, mentally, emotionally. Pike stood near the basement stairs, talking low into his radio, requesting backup and a forensic team. "We're dealing with possible cold case evidence," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. But everyone could feel the shift. What began as a wellness check was starting to unfold as something much deeper, older, and more personal. Delaney Voss had gone back to the attic box. The photos still haunted her, black and white snapshots of children with empty eyes, most of them unsmiling. She ran her fingers over the edges of one, a young girl holding a stuffed rabbit standing in front of the basement hatch. There were already 2 locks on it in that photo. And in the background, just barely visible, a blurred silhouette, tall, thin, standing too still. It gave her a chill. She flipped the photo over. No name. Just the year, 1961. One of the younger officers, Torres, had begun inspecting the basement walls. "Something's off," he said. "This part's hollow." He tapped near the back corner, where the wall sounded different. With Pike's approval, he carefully removed a wood panel, revealing a narrow cavity behind it. Folded inside, wrapped in cloth, was a child's backpack, pink, dusty, old. Delaney took it with gloved hands and opened it slowly. Inside was a toy rabbit, a name badge reading Abigail, and a photo of a girl, the same one from earlier. On the back, Abigail Caraway. Delaney's breath caught. Same last name as Mildred. Back upstairs, Mildred hadn't moved. Her eyes followed no one, but it was clear she was listening. When Delaney brought the photo to her, she didn't look surprised. "She was the first," Mildred said quietly. "Before the locks. Before the warnings." Delaney sat across from her, heart pounding. Who was she? Mildred finally looked up. "My sister. My parents said she disappeared in the woods. But I remember. She heard it before any of us. She used to talk to the basement. Said it talked back." Delaney felt a sharp, invisible line being crossed. This wasn't just Mildred's story. This was generational. A cycle. She looked back down at the backpack, trying to imagine a child vanishing without a trace. "Did your parents lie about it?" she asked. Mildred nodded. "They thought lies were safer than truth. But lies rot. And the truth, it waits." Her voice was steadier now, calmer. "That door doesn't just hold memories. It holds what people leave behind when they pretend it didn't happen." The rain started minutes later, soft at first, then heavier. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The house seemed to grow darker, even with the lights on. The officers gathered their notes, marked evidence, and began preparing the formal report. But Delaney stood at the basement door once more, staring at the lock. And this time, she felt something new. Not fear, not yet. It was recognition. As if the house had begun to remember her too. Some doors don't open. They remember who knocks. Delaney stood alone at the edge of the basement, just far enough from the door to feel safe, or so she told herself. The lock still hung there, silent, heavy, and cold. But the silence surrounding it wasn't normal. It felt alive. Every creak in the wood, every shift in the air seemed amplified. She told herself it was just stress, the weight of the investigation getting to her. But deep down, she knew better. The house wasn't just holding secrets, it was watching them now. When she turned to leave, she heard something. Not a sound, not exactly. It was more like a thought that didn't belong to her. A phrase. A name. Abigail. It drifted through her mind like a memory she'd never lived. She froze, hand on the railing. Had someone said it? She looked around. No one was there. Upstairs, the others were busy cataloging evidence. But that one word repeated in her mind like a whisper between her thoughts. Abigail. 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 She gripped the banister tighter, grounding herself. Back in the kitchen, Mildred watched her with unreadable eyes. The old woman hadn't moved much, but now she seemed alert again. "You heard her, didn't you?" she said softly. Delaney blinked. "What?" "Abigail," Mildred replied. "She only speaks when someone's ready." Delaney sat down across from her slowly. "Are you saying she's still here?" Mildred gave a small nod. "Not in the way you think. But yes. And now that you've heard her, she won't stop." Meanwhile, Pike had called in reinforcements from the regional unit. He didn't like where things were going. The discovery of the backpack changed everything. They had enough evidence to open a formal investigation into a decades-old missing child case, and possibly others. But what troubled him more than the legal implications was the emotional atmosphere of the house. His officers were getting jumpy. One had reported seeing a shadow move across a hallway. Another swore he heard someone humming downstairs when no one was there. It was starting to affect them all. Delaney stepped outside to clear her head. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy. Her shirt clung to her skin, and the wind carried a strange scent, not rot, not mold. Something older, earthy, like something had been buried deep and was now beginning to breathe again. She rubbed her eyes and leaned on the porch railing. She needed a break. Just a moment to think clearly. But then, across the street, she saw someone. A girl. Standing by the trees. Still. Small. Pale. Delaney's heart skipped. She blinked, and the girl was gone. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Maybe it was stress, or maybe Mildred was right, and something had chosen her. Down in the basement, the last lock still held. But the house had already begun to open. Not physically, not yet. But in their minds. In their memories. And some part of Delaney knew the door wasn't just waiting to be opened. It was testing them, one by one. It starts with whispers. Then it moves in. Officer Dillard hadn't said much since the backpack was found. He'd been in the basement longer than the others, helping with measurements and photographs, documenting the objects near the sealed door. But now, his silence was different, heavier. He stood near the basement stairs, unmoving, staring at the concrete floor with unfocused eyes. Delaney noticed first. "Dillard," she called gently. No response. She tried again. He blinked, but didn't look up. When she stepped closer, he muttered something. "She's not alone down there." Delaney froze. "What did you say?" she asked. Dillard's voice was flat, far away. "She said the others were cold. That they sleep. But not her. She waits. Delaney knelt beside him, trying to stay calm. "Who told you that?" she asked. Finally, he turned to her. His eyes were red, wet. A voice. "Little girl. Same one you heard, right?" She didn't answer. Her throat tightened. He continued, "She said my brother's here. But that's impossible. My brother died in Afghanistan." Delaney reached for her radio. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Upstairs, Sergeant Pike was reviewing the chain of events. The evidence was piling up, but so eram os sinais de que a equipe estava se quebrando. Dillard wasn't the only one acting strangely. Officer Torres had reported seeing movement in the mirror of the guest bathroom, but nothing was behind him. Another officer claimed she heard someone laughing softly through the floor vents. They were trained professionals, and Pike trusted them. But stress did strange things to people. That's what he told himself. But deep down, a darker thought was growing. What if it's not the people cracking? What if it's the house changing them? Delaney took Dillard outside for air. He sat on the porch steps, hunched, shaking. "I saw her," he whispered. "I didn't want to. But I did. She looked at me like she knew everything. Everything I regret. Everything I've done." Delaney didn't know what to say. She had felt it too. The pressure, the way the house seemed to reach into you and pull things out you'd buried deep. Dillard wiped his face, tried to stand. "I need to go," he said. "I shouldn't be here." But the moment he stepped off the porch, he staggered. Delaney caught him before he hit the ground. Pike ordered Dillard to be taken off-site and observed. No arguments. He needed rest, distance, before things got worse. The medic said he was stable but needed psychological evaluation. As the cruiser drove off, Pike looked back at the house. He hated this place. Hated the way it watched them. "Nobody goes down alone anymore," he ordered. "Always in pairs. No exceptions." His voice was sharp. Controlled. But even he couldn't deny it. They were all being affected. And the door hadn't even been opened yet. That night, as the rain returned, Delaney sat alone in her temporary station inside the house. She opened her notebook, but her mind kept drifting. The whisper in her head wouldn't stop. Sometimes it sounded like a little girl. Other times, it sounded like her own voice from years ago, saying things she hadn't said in a long time. Regrets. Memories. Pain. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Don't let it in." But it was already too late. The cracks had started. And once the house found a way in, it never left. Sometimes, you don't open the door. It opens you. The storm returned just after midnight, a low growl of thunder rolling across the sky like a warning no one could ignore. Rain beat against the old windows, steady and sharp. Inside the house, the silence had deepened. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that listens. Delaney hadn't slept. She stayed downstairs, flipping through old documents and photographs found in the attic, trying to piece together the Carraway family history. Something about the name Abigail kept pulling her back. It wasn't just Mildred's sister. There was more. A pattern. Other girls. Other names. All lost. All linked by one thing. The house. Pike had assigned 2 officers to watch the basement door through the night. They sat quietly, facing the hatch, eyes heavy, flashlights steady. Nothing had moved for hours. But at 3:12 a.m., the silence broke. A soft click. One of the officers, Jenkins, jumped to his feet. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The other nodded slowly. They both stared at the door. The lock, the final untouched one, was swinging slightly, as if it had just been brushed. No one had touched it. No one had gone near it. But it moved. They stepped closer, weapons drawn. And then the sound came again. Click, click, click. like someone on the other side was unlocking something. Slowly. Upstairs, Delaney shot out of her chair, heart racing. She didn't know why, but something deep in her gut told her, it's starting. She ran to the basement and met Pike halfway down. It moved, he said. Not much. But enough. Delaney looked past him. The officers were pale, rattled. The air near the hatch felt colder than before, heavy, metallic. The lock had stopped swinging, but now it hung crooked, like it had been twisted from inside. No one touched it, Jenkins repeated. I swear. It just moved. Pike stepped forward, studying the lock. Is this thing even still secured? He asked. He reached out to test it, and it fell off in his hand. The moment it hit the floor, the entire house seemed to shift. The lights flickered. The air pressure dropped. Everyone froze. No one spoke. The hatch didn't open, but it wanted to. There was a pull now, subtle but unmistakable, like gravity drawing them toward it. Bishop, the dog, who had been lying in the hallway, suddenly rose and began to whine. Not bark. Whine. Low and fearful. He backed away from the stairs, tail between his legs, and lay flat on the floor with his head down. He wouldn't go near it. Pike ordered everyone out of the basement. We need to regroup, he said firmly. Seal the door. No one goes in. Not until we know what we're dealing with. But it was already too late for that. The lock was gone. The final barrier was broken. And whatever was behind the door knew. It had been waiting, watching, listening. And now it was free to whisper louder, to reach further. Not physically, not yet, but in their thoughts, their dreams, their past. That night, Delaney had a dream she couldn't explain. She was standing in a field, but the ground beneath her feet was soft, like freshly dug soil. Ahead of her stood a little girl with long, tangled hair. She held a toy rabbit in one hand and pointed to something behind Delaney. You left the door open, the girl said, her voice hollow. Delaney turned around and saw herself, younger, standing in front of the basement door, crying, reaching for the handle. She woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat, and in the darkness of her room, for just a second, she thought she heard someone whisper her name. After the scream, there's the silence. But silence has a voice, too. The morning after the lock fell, the Caraway house felt heavier than ever, as if the air had thickened overnight. No one mentioned what they'd seen, not out loud. But the shift was undeniable. Pike canceled all new entries into the basement. The hatch was sealed temporarily with chains and a steel bar, but it didn't feel like enough. Everyone knew the door didn't care about locks. It had waited years, decades, and now it was awake. But for now, it remained shut. Not by force. By choice. Delaney sat in her car outside the house for almost an hour before going back in. She kept seeing the girl from her dream, Abigail, the way she stood so still, holding that toy rabbit. She hadn't told anyone about the dream. Not yet. But something in her heart said it wasn't just a dream. It was a message. A warning. Or worse, a memory that wasn't hers, but had become part of her. As she stepped out of the car, a strange wind passed through her, warm and cold at once. Like someone breathing too close to her skin. Inside, the team was quiet. Officer Jenkins had requested reassignment. Said he couldn't sleep. Said the house followed him into his dreams. Torres had started drinking again, and everyone noticed. Even Pike, who prided himself on being a wall, had begun to unravel. He sat longer at his desk. Smoked more than usual. Spoke less. They were all coming apart in slow motion. Not from what they'd seen, but from what they hadn't. The not knowing was the infection, and it was spreading. Delaney went back to Mildred, who had barely eaten or moved since the door reacted. "Why now?" she asked the old woman. "Why did it wait all this time, just to break the lock on its own?" Mildred looked at her, eyes sunken but clear. "It's always waiting," she said. "But it only opens when it's found the right one." Delaney's throat tightened. "The right one for what?" Mildred smiled softly, but there was no warmth in it. "To remember." Later that day, a technician found something odd while reviewing the basement audio recordings. A whisper, faint, layered, hard to isolate. It came from the exact moment the lock dropped. Slowed down and filtered, the sound became clearer. A phrase, repeated 3 times. "Let me show you." No one could explain it. No one could trace the voice. But everyone heard it. And for the first time, even Pike looked afraid. That evening, as the wind picked up again, Delaney sat by the kitchen window, staring at the house across the street. Everything looked normal. Quiet. Safe. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She thought about her dream again. About the girl. About the dirt under her feet. About the version of herself who stood crying in front of the door. And without meaning to, she whispered it back, the same phrase from the recording. "Let me show you." And for a moment, she felt the house listening. Some things are buried in boxes. Others are buried in silence. By noon, Delaney and Pike were at the county records office. Pike had finally approved access to archived building permits, land deeds, and family histories connected to the Caraway property. The clerk, an older man with thick glasses and a thin voice, didn't ask many questions. Just handed over a stack of yellowed files, tied with string, and said, "Be careful. Some of those records go back before the town even had a name." Delaney raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. Something told her they were about to find things that weren't meant to be found. They spread the documents across a long table in the back room. Most were typical: purchase histories, construction notes, maintenance logs. But one file stood out. It was labeled Caraway, Original Estate, Pre-Subdivision. Inside were handwritten pages, brittle and stained, some nearly falling apart. One note, dated 1921, detailed a complaint from a local builder. Refused to dig foundation deeper. Claimed soil beneath house line was wrong. Said it made men sick. One vomited. One left job. No one wanted to go near it. Another page, undated, simply read, "No more digging. Seal it. Mark it quiet." Delaney felt a chill crawl up her spine. These weren't just odd details. They were warnings, buried under decades of bureaucracy and dust. Another document, folded into a legal envelope, contained a list of names, 10 in total. Ages ranging from 7 to 15. Next to each name, a single word. Vanished. No police reports attached. No context. Just the names and silence. Pike scanned them and froze at the last one. Abigail Caraway. "It's real," he whispered. She wasn't just a story. Back at the house, Mildred stared at an old photograph Delaney had left on the kitchen table. It showed the Caraway family. Parents, 2 daughters, and a 3rd child whose face had been scratched out. Mildred ran her finger over the missing face, expression blank. "He wasn't supposed to be born," she murmured. No one heard her. No one was in the room. But he came anyway. He came through the floor. Pike returned later that evening with a different energy, focused, quiet, shaken. "There's something under the house," he said to Delaney. "Not just in the basement. Beneath it. A space that wasn't built. It was left." He handed her a page torn from one of the records. A crude drawing showed the house sitting over what looked like a natural pit, marked with old symbols neither of them could recognize. "It's older than the foundation. Older than the Caraways. They built around it. Maybe even because of it." Delaney didn't speak for a long time. She stared at the drawing, her mind racing. What kind of pit made workers sick? What kind of place makes people vanish without a trace? And why did Mildred's family stay? As she traced the lines of the diagram with her finger, she realized something terrifying. The pit wasn't under the house. It was the house. Everything had been built on top of it, as if to hide something or to hold it in place. And now, that something was moving again. What do you think the Caraway family was hiding? Drop your theory in the comments, and watch your step. Sometimes the floor hides more than it shows. Some things are buried. Others are waiting. The floorboards creaked louder than usual as Pike and Delaney descended once again into the basement, this time not just to observe, but to open. The steel bar and chains they had installed after the lock dropped were still in place, but even now, they seemed to tremble under an unseen pressure. Delaney stared at the hatch, feeling the weight of it in her chest. "Whatever's down there," Pike muttered, "we're done guessing." He nodded to the officers behind them. 2 had shovels. 1 held a portable drill. No more whispers. No more theories. It was time to dig. The hatch opened easier than expected, as if it had been waiting. Beneath it was a steep set of stone steps, covered in thick dust and cobwebs. These weren't part of any official blueprint. Pike confirmed it. "This isn't on any record," he said. "Not even in the 1921 files." The air below was cold and still, heavy with dampness. They moved slowly, flashlights flickering as if struggling to stay alive. Bishop, the K-9 unit, refused to enter. He sat at the top of the stairs, growling low, refusing to make eye contact with the darkness below. The stone steps led to a narrow chamber carved directly into the earth. The walls were uneven, as if clawed by hand, and the smell was thick, not rot, but something older. Ancient. On the ground, half buried in dirt, were bones. Small bones. Human. Some still had remnants of fabric clinging to them. Children's clothing, faded and eaten by time. Delaney felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat. One of the officers backed away, whispering a prayer. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. They had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In the far corner of the chamber, there was something else. A wall made of stacked stones, tightly packed, as if to block something on the other side. Symbols had been scratched into them. Circles, lines, shapes that didn't match any language they recognized. Delaney moved closer, her light trembling in her hand. There was something breathing. Not air. Not wind. But something behind the wall seemed to pulse, slow, rhythmic. Like a heartbeat coming from the earth itself. Pike stepped back. "We need to stop," he said firmly. "Seal this again. Bring in archaeologists. Forensics. I'm not letting my team go further until we know what the hell this is." But as he turned to climb back up, a sound came from behind the stone wall. A voice, faint, childlike, but not innocent. "Delaney." Her blood froze. It wasn't shouted. It was spoken, like a secret being passed. She turned slowly. Did anyone else hear that? Silence. Blank stares. No one nodded. No one moved. Only her. When they reached the top of the stairs, Bishop was gone. The leash was there, torn at the clasp, and paw prints led out into the hallway, then vanished. Delaney stared at the spot where the dog had been. Something was wrong. Deeper than they imagined. The door had been opened. The pit had been found. But what lay behind the stone wall wasn't just history. It was waiting. And now it knew her name. What goes in may not come back out. What comes out never goes back in. The search for Bishop began at dawn. Delaney and Torres followed the faint paw prints across the hallway, through the living room, and out the back door, until they stopped, abruptly, in the middle of the overgrown yard. No signs of a struggle. No blood. Just absence. As if the dog had been lifted from the ground. Torres crouched beside the final print, touching the dirt. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "He wouldn't run. Not Bishop." Delaney didn't reply. Her eyes were on the tree line at the edge of the property. For a moment, she thought she saw movement. But when she blinked, it was gone. Inside the house, the atmosphere had changed. It was subtle, but real. The air felt warmer, despite the storm the night before. The shadows lingered longer. Sounds carried differently. Footsteps echoing where they shouldn't, murmurs from corners that had always been silent. The officers were uneasy. Jenkins didn't return. Pike was short-tempered, pacing more than speaking. One by one, the team began to break down, not from fear of what they'd found, but from something they couldn't name. Something that was now in the walls, in the air, in them. Delaney reviewed the body cam footage from their descent into the pit, frame by frame. At minute 17, when she approached the stone wall, something flickered in the far corner of the screen. A shape, child-sized, just for a second, then gone. She froze the image and zoomed in. No features, no color. Just a shadow standing upright, watching. Not one of them. And it hadn't been noticed in the moment. Only the camera caught it. Her skin turned cold. She closed the laptop and whispered, "How long has it been watching?" Meanwhile, Pike received a call from a neighboring precinct. A retired deputy named Gerald Monroe claimed to recognize the name Abigail Carraway from a case in the early 80s. "There was a girl who vanished without a trace," Monroe said. "No body, no leads. Her parents swore she ran away, but," his voice dropped. "That family? They weren't right. That house? I always knew something was wrong there." Pike asked for records. Monroe promised to dig, but warned him, "Be careful. That place doesn't just hide things. It makes you forget what you found." That night, Delaney had another dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. She was standing in the hallway again, holding a lantern, following wet footprints that weren't hers. They led to the basement. When she reached the hatch, it was already open. She heard breathing, but not behind her. Inside her. As if something had entered and was waiting to be noticed. She turned slowly and saw a figure at the bottom of the stairs. Not a child. Not a man. Something in between. Watching. She tried to scream, but her voice stayed in her throat like a stone. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, heart racing. The house was still. Too still. She reached for her notebook and wrote 3 words she couldn't shake. It followed me. Because deep down, she knew, the pit was not just a place. It was a presence. And now, it was no longer down there. It was moving, and it was curious. Some places don't trap your body. They trap your soul. Officer Torres had made up his mind. After 12 days inside the Carraway house, he couldn't take it anymore. He'd seen things. Shadows, flickers, reflections that didn't match what should have been there. But the worst part wasn't what he saw. It was what he felt. Strange thoughts, memories that didn't belong to him. He started dreaming about being a child, holding hands with a girl with long hair, walking into a dark tunnel. He'd wake up soaked in sweat, heart racing. "I'm done," he told Pike. "This case isn't mine anymore." Pike looked at him for a long moment. "You can try to leave," he said flatly. "Let's see if it works." It was hard to tell if he meant it as a warning or a fact. Torres shrugged, packed his things, and drove off just before sunset. But 3 hours later, he called Delaney, his voice shaking. He was pulled over on the side of a road just 15 minutes from the house. "GPS keeps looping. I've circled twice. I always end up here. It's like, the house won't let me leave." Before she could respond, the call dropped. Back at the house, Delaney began noticing a new pattern. The dreams were getting stronger, and they weren't staying in the night. During the day, if she blinked too long, she'd catch flashes. The stone stairs, the wall of bones, Abigail's stuffed rabbit lying in the dirt. This wasn't fear anymore. It was mental invasion. The house wasn't just watching them, it was writing itself into their memories, planting things that had never happened, and making them feel real. At the station, the documents from retired Deputy Monroe finally arrived. In the stack was a non-official report from 1983, handwritten, never digitized. It described an 8-year-old girl who vanished without a trace. Name: Abigail Caraway. But there was a problem. The parents listed didn't have that name. Their surname was Winters. They changed their name, Delaney whispered. To hide. To bury the truth. Pike said nothing. He just stared at the name. And now, he murmured, we dug it up. That evening, Mildred was found standing alone at the basement door, eyes closed, hand on the latch. He's awake now, she said calmly, without being asked. And he's testing all of you. When Delaney asked who he was, Mildred gave a smile that felt like pity. Not a man. Not a thing. A reflection that found shape. An echo that learned to crawl. She pressed her palm against the door like it was someone's skin. He entered the day my father screamed. He stayed the day my mother pretended it never happened. Delaney didn't sleep that night. Torres hadn't returned. His phone was off. No GPS signal. No signs. And in the back of her mind, something took root. A quiet, terrifying thought. Nobody leaves the Caraway house because they want to. Once the house sees you, it chooses you. The first thing it takes is your sense of time. The next is your name. Delaney woke up in her car. She didn't remember falling asleep there. The driver's seat was reclined, her jacket balled up behind her neck. Her phone was in her hand, screen dark, battery drained. The sun was already high, too high for morning. Her mouth was dry, her hands cold. She sat up slowly, blinking against the light. Had she been dreaming? Or was this another one of the house's tricks? She looked at the house and felt a moment of dread. For half a second, she didn't recognize it. Not just the structure, but the place. As if she'd never been there before. As if she didn't belong here. Inside, the team was quieter than ever. Pike avoided eye contact. Jenkins was pale and visibly thinner. No one had heard from Torres. His cruiser was found, abandoned, with the keys still in the ignition. No sign of struggle, no tracks, no body. Just gone. Pike had filed the report, but the words felt hollow. No one believed he simply left. Delaney tried to write the timeline on her notepad, but her handwriting was shaky. Her notes didn't make sense. Some pages were blank. Others had words she didn't remember writing. It's watching from behind your eyes. She went into the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Something felt off. Her reflection didn't feel quite synced. Her expression lagged by a fraction of a second. Her eyes looked unfamiliar, like she was wearing someone else's skin. She leaned in closer. There was dirt under her fingernails, fresh dirt. She hadn't been outside. Not that she could remember. She washed her hands furiously, heart racing. When she looked back up, she thought, just for a second, she saw a child standing behind her in the mirror. When she turned around, the bathroom was empty. That evening, Mildred was lucid again. For the first time in days, her eyes were focused. "You feel it now, don't you?" she asked Delaney. "It doesn't take you all at once. It softens the world. It loosens the threads. One memory here, one piece of yourself there. Until you're only what it remembers of you." Delaney sat down across from her, barely able to swallow. "What does it want from me?" she asked. Mildred's lips barely moved. "You're not here to stop it," she said. "You're here to become part of it." Later that night, Delaney went through old photos on her phone. She was looking for one she had taken the day the last lock fell. But the image was gone. In its place was a photo she didn't remember taking, the staircase, taken from the basement floor looking up. And in the photo, she was standing at the top. Only, she didn't remember being down there. Her heart thudded. She scrolled back and found two more she didn't recognize. One of her asleep in the car. One of her staring into the mirror. Someone, or something, was seeing her from the inside. The next morning, she forgot her own birthday. She couldn't remember the name of the street she grew up on. Her badge number. Her father's face. Little pieces, gone. And something else was replacing them. New memories, ones that didn't belong. A song a child used to sing. A cold room with no light. The sound of fingernails scraping stone. She held her head in her hands, trembling. Because now she understood. The house didn't want to kill her. It wanted to keep her. To find the truth, she must forget everything else. Delaney stopped trying to fight the missing pieces. The harder she tried to remember, the more exhausted she felt, as if her thoughts were being erased not by force, but by permission. Like she had agreed, on some deep level, to be rewritten. Her voice was quieter now. Her eyes lingered longer on shadows. She didn't call her father that morning like she used to. In fact, she couldn't remember his number, or if he was still alive. All she remembered was Abigail. Her name echoed like a song stuck in her head, over and over again. Abigail, Abigail, Abigail. The others kept their distance. Jenkins had taken leave, Pike was barely sleeping, and no one would go down into the basement anymore. But Delaney, she started to feel pulled by it, drawn to it like gravity. She began sitting near the hatch, eyes closed, breathing in the cold air that rose from beneath the floorboards. Sometimes she whispered to it, and sometimes, worse, it whispered back. Not in words, but in feelings. Regret, hunger, loneliness, familiarity. It didn't feel like a monster. It felt like a memory trying to survive. That night, the hatch opened on its own. Slowly, silently. No wind, no sound, just a soft creak, like an invitation. Delaney didn't hesitate. She went down alone. No flashlight. Only the faint orange glow from a lantern she found at the top of the stairs. She descended into the dark, step by step, as if she'd done it 100 times before. Her feet knew the way. Her hand brushed the wall like it recognized the grooves. At the bottom, the dirt floor was cool and soft. The air didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt still, like the inside of a memory. In the far corner of the chamber, the stacked stone wall was gone. In its place stood a door, wooden, ancient, carved with symbols she didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. It pulsed faintly, not with light, but with emotion. Grief. And behind it, she felt it, the thing, the presence, the echo. Not waiting to hurt her. Waiting to be seen. She stepped closer, reached out her hand, and then heard the voice again. Not a whisper this time. Clear. Young. Familiar. Don't forget me. She turned around, and there she was. Abigail. Pale, barefoot, wearing the same dress from the photo Delaney had studied for days. Her eyes were wide, but not afraid. You almost did, she said. You almost became the house. Delaney fell to her knees, tears burning down her face. What is this? She asked. What are you? Abigail stepped closer. I'm what was left, what it took, what it couldn't finish. She touched Delaney's forehead. You were strong. You remembered. That's how you found me." Delaney closed her eyes. In that moment, every piece of her, the real her, tried to come back. Her name, her face, her past. But the house fought back, too, pushing memories into her like claws. Screams in basements. Parents lying. Locked doors. Forgotten children. Delaney gritted her teeth, whispered her own name over and over. "I am Delaney Voss. I am Delaney Voss." And just like that, the house pulled back. For now. Abigail smiled, not in joy, but in peace. "It's not over," she said. "But now, you know where it begins." Sometimes what returns isn't what left. Delaney emerged from the basement just after sunrise. Her clothes were coated in dust, her eyes red and dazed, but she didn't look afraid. She looked quiet. Too quiet. Pike had fallen asleep in the living room chair, and when he opened his eyes to see her standing there, his breath caught. She wasn't the same woman who had gone down there. Her body moved slower, but with purpose. Her face was expressionless, like someone trying to remember how to act human. "Delaney?" he asked, standing. She blinked once, then nodded. "I saw her," she said softly. "I saw Abigail." Pike didn't know what to say. For the last week, they'd been losing themselves, one by one, to whatever force was rooted beneath that house. But now, the woman who had been slipping away into whispers and dreams was speaking clearly. Calmly. Confidently. Too confidently. He watched her movements, listened to her breathing, and something inside him twisted. It wasn't just that she seemed different. It was that she seemed complete. Like something missing had been filled, and maybe not by her. "What happened down there?" he asked. She didn't answer directly. Just looked him in the eye and said, "She remembered who she was. And now I do too." The others kept their distance. Jenkins returned briefly to retrieve personal items and left without a word. No one asked where Torres was anymore. Mildred hadn't spoken since Delaney's return. She just stared at her from the kitchen, hands trembling in her lap, as if seeing a ghost she didn't dare name. That evening, Delaney wandered the house alone, her fingers brushing the walls as she walked slowly from room to room. She stopped at the mirror in the upstairs hallway and whispered something to it. The glass rippled slightly, just once, then returned to stillness. Pike saw it from the stairs. He didn't say a word. Later that night, Delaney sat at the dining room table with an old journal in her lap. One they hadn't found before. The name inside the cover, Margaret Carraway, 1923. "This house didn't begin with Abigail," she said aloud, not looking up. "She was the first to resist it, not the first it took." Pike stepped into the room slowly, the weight of her words settling around them like fog. "What is it, then?" he asked. "What's under this house?" Delaney finally met his gaze. "It's not what's under," she said. "It's what's woven through it. The house isn't built on something. It is the thing." That night, Pike locked his bedroom door. Not because of the house, but because of her. For the first time since they arrived, he was afraid of Delaney. Not because she was violent. Not because she'd changed. But because she seemed to understand it now, in a way no one else did. And when she closed her eyes to sleep, he could swear the floorboards beneath her bed pulsed once, like something breathing through her. Some truths rot slower than bodies. And when they surface, they stink of memory. It had been 2 days since Delaney returned from the basement, and no one on the team knew how to talk to her anymore. She wasn't hostile. She wasn't erratic. But there was something in her eyes, a calm that didn't match the fear everyone else still carried. Pike kept watching her from a distance, noticing the way she seemed to walk directly toward things that weren't there before, a loose panel in the hallway floor, a hairline crack in the wall behind the fireplace. "She's following a map no one gave her," Jenkins whispered. "Like she's been here longer than any of us." And no one could shake that feeling, that maybe the Delaney who came back wasn't the same one who went down. On the third night, she went into the study, alone, and removed a floor tile near the corner. No tools, no hesitation. Underneath was a compartment they'd never noticed. Inside, a bundle of old fabric and bones. Small bones. Child-sized. Wrapped in cloth that had rotted black. She didn't scream. She didn't call for help. She just sat with them, whispering something inaudible. Pike, watching from the doorway, felt the urge to run but stayed frozen. "I didn't find them," she said without turning. "They showed themselves to me. Because I listened." And then she looked over her shoulder, eyes hollow. "You're still trying to see. That's your problem." Jenkins left the house that night. Didn't say goodbye. Just got in his car and drove into the storm. Pike didn't try to stop him. There wasn't anything to say. He spent the night sleeping in the patrol car, parked under a tree across the street, engine off, door locked, pistol on his chest. And even then, he didn't feel safe. Not from the house. Not from Delaney. Not from what she might be carrying inside her now. The house didn't just mark people. It transformed them. Slowly. Quietly. From the inside out. The next morning, the wall behind the kitchen cracked from floor to ceiling. No quake. No wind. Just a single clean fracture that hadn't been there the night before. Delaney touched it gently, like petting a scar. "It's loosening," she said. "The parts of the house that were made by men, they're falling away. What's underneath wants out." Pike tried to ask what she meant, but the look she gave him shut him down. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't even warning him. She was translating, like a messenger for something older than language. And for the first time, Pike considered something truly terrifying. Maybe they hadn't opened the door. Maybe the house had opened her. And if that was true, whatever was coming next wasn't going to come from below. It was going to come through her. The house doesn't grow. It remembers what it used to be. At dawn, the hallway changed. Pike was the first to notice it. A stretch of wall that had always been solid was now longer, by exactly 6 feet. He ran his hand along the plaster. It was dry, seamless. No signs of renovation. It was as if the house had stretched overnight, rewriting its own layout. He called for Delaney, but she was already standing at the end of the hall, staring at what hadn't been there before. A door. Old. Wooden. Crooked. No knob. Just a thin slit of darkness around the edges. "It wasn't here yesterday," Pike said. Delaney didn't look at him. "It was always here. You just couldn't see it yet." Without asking for permission, she stepped forward and pressed her palm against the door. It opened with a soft groan, the kind of sound wood makes when waking from a long sleep. The air behind it was thick and cold. No stairs. No hallway. Just a square room, stone walls, and a ceiling so low it nearly touched her head. Inside, the walls were covered in carvings, spirals, eyes, human figures bent backwards, mouths open in screams. And in the center of the room, a single wooden chair, facing the wall. "This isn't architecture," Pike whispered behind her. "It's ritual." Delaney stepped inside slowly. Her breath didn't fog in the cold. Her pulse barely moved. She touched the carvings like she had seen them before. And then the air shifted. The light dimmed. From the corner of the room came a sound. Not a voice, not a breath, but a shape. And it formed into Abigail. But this time, her face was different. Paler. Older. Her eyes sunken, hollow. "You're too far," she said. "You went past remembering. Now you're becoming." Delaney stumbled back. "Becoming what?" Abigail didn't answer. She only looked at Pike. "She's not yours anymore." Back upstairs, The rest of the house groaned, like it had inhaled. The wallpaper in the dining room peeled back in one long strip. The floorboards in the foyer warped and cracked. Light bulbs flickered and dimmed. Mildred began to mutter again, eyes wide, staring into nothing. "It's thinning," she whispered. "It's almost through." Pike pulled Delaney out of the new room. "We need to seal it," he said, voice cracking. "Now." But she shook her head slowly. "You can't seal something that lives in memory. It's not the room that's open. It's me." That night, no one slept. Not in the house. Not in the cars outside. Everyone felt it, a pressure in their chest, a tension in their bones. The house had changed. Not because something had entered, but because something inside had grown bold enough to reshape the world around it. And now, as Pike sat by the basement stairs with his gun on his lap, he realized the truth. They were no longer inside the house. The house was inside them. To end what the house began, someone must stay. Delaney hadn't spoken in hours. She walked through the house like a thread being pulled, her fingers brushing walls that pulsed under her touch. The others gave her space. Pike followed from a distance, watching, terrified. Not of her body, not of her voice, but of her stillness. Something inside her had solidified. She didn't flinch anymore. Didn't fear the shadows. The fear had passed through her like a fever. And now, something else had settled in its place, understanding. The house had stopped fighting her. Because she'd stopped fighting it. She returned to the door that wasn't there before. The ritual room. But this time, she brought something with her. The photograph of Abigail and the stuffed rabbit they had recovered from the basement weeks ago. She placed both on the chair in the center, gently, like offerings. "She was never meant to stay lost," Delaney said aloud. "She was the warning, not the curse." Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the journal of Margaret Carroway. The final page was blank, until now. Ink bled into it, line by line, forming words in a hand not her own. One stays, one leaves. The house doesn't open unless it replaces what it takes. Pike stepped forward, shaking. "What does that mean?" Delaney looked at him with the saddest eyes he had ever seen. "It doesn't want to spread," she said. "It wants to be remembered. It survives by staying buried in someone. In a soul. In a name." Pike's jaw clenched. "No. We're not doing this. There has to be another way." But she shook her head. "It let me go once. As a child. I came back without knowing it. That's why I was drawn here. That's why I remembered her. The house marked me first, a long time ago. This has always been mine to end." Outside, the sky darkened, though no storm was forecast. Clouds swirled unnaturally above the Carroway house, as if something above sensed what was coming. Mildred sat on the porch, her face blank, her voice nearly gone. She whispered the same word again and again, "Trade, trade, trade." Inside, the walls began to hum. Not with sound, but with heat and vibration, and a pulsing rhythm like a slow, deep breath. The house had heard the offer, and it was listening. Delaney turned back toward the stairwell, toward the pit below. Her eyes were wet now, but her hands were steady. She spoke one final sentence to Pike, who stood paralyzed in the doorway. "You need to leave this place," she said. "You still belong to the world." "I don't." Pike tried to move to stop her, but the floor between them shuddered, and a thin line cracked through the tiles. The house was choosing. Delaney stepped into the dark without looking back, and as the walls began to close behind her, Pike understood. The house doesn't kill. It keeps. Not every door closes behind you. Some remain waiting. Pike never saw her again. Not fully. After Delaney stepped into the dark, the ground sealed itself like flesh healing over a wound. The house went silent. The air cleared. The strange tension that had haunted the walls slowly faded. And for the first time in weeks, Pike could breathe without feeling like something was watching. But it wasn't peace, not really. It was more like a pause. A waiting silence. He knew it wasn't over. The house hadn't been defeated. It had simply accepted the trade. He returned with a team days later. The walls had stopped shifting. The cracks were gone. The hidden room? Bricked over. The pit? Vanished. Every door opened like a normal door. Every floorboard sounded like wood again. Officially, the case was closed. The final report cited psychological collapse of key personnel and environmental trauma. There was no mention of Abigail. No mention of the trade. Delaney was listed as missing under unusual circumstances. But Pike never called her missing. In his mind, she was still inside, not lost. Held. Months passed. The house remained locked up, unoccupied. Locals avoided the street entirely. They said the new silence around the Caraway property was worse than the rumors. As if the house was holding its breath again. As if it was watching. One neighbor swore they saw a light turn on upstairs one night, just for a moment. Another said they heard footsteps in the grass. But no one dared check. And Pike never went back. Not really. Though sometimes, he parked across the street and stared, waiting for a sign. For her face in a window. For a whisper in the dark. Then, one autumn evening, he found something. An envelope resting on the passenger seat of his truck. No return address. Inside, a photograph. It was old, black and white, slightly burned on the edges. In it, a young girl stood in front of the Caraway house, holding a stuffed rabbit. Her face was familiar. Too familiar. Pike flipped it over. No name. Just 4 words in handwriting he couldn't mistake. The house remembers you. Pike sat for a long time with the photo in his hands. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He simply looked at the house, its windows still, its doors shut, its walls quiet. And in the stillness, he finally understood what Delaney had meant. The house didn't want to spread. It didn't want to be destroyed. It just wanted to be remembered. And now, it was. Through her. Through him. Through anyone who had heard its story. Because some homes don't disappear. Some homes stay. And wait for someone to come back. Enjoyed the story? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. The house still has secrets to share.